right, Jesse, cue it up. Everybody in their places. It's time to go.
Are we rolling? Yeah, we're rolling. Okay, let's get it done, everybody. Let's go.
Hey, Reagan, how's my hair? Is it okay?
Poxy, they can't see you.
All right, come on, let's go. It's toots, people. Poxy, start on page 4. Get the lines right this time.
Right, I got it this time, I swear.
4, 3.
Come on. It's time for the Ghost of Hollywood.
Welcome to the 30th episode and Season 3 finale of The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Ms. Reagan here with Poxy Leonard, and tonight is all about cinematography.
That's right, Reagan, because our friend Pat Capone is in the house to discuss his recent work as the director of photography for the hit series Succession.
And if you've seen Succession, like even one episode, you know that the cinematography is a central component of the show itself. And in this instance, you don't need to be some kind of camera buff or a cinephile to really grasp that there's such visual uniqueness applied to Succession.
But if you are a cinephile or a camera buff, and, got a trend somewhere along those lines, then the intrigue leads to a flood of questions if you watch Succession, many of which we hope to ask tonight. Now, shot using the elements of cinema verite, which is applied in conjunction with more traditional work, and this is a topical description here, so take that with a grain of salt. Now, Succession overall takes an unconventional stand in delivering its story, right? Often taking advantage of the lack of visual display to build intensity and place more importance on particular events that occur throughout the series.
Side note, and I'll be quick, if you aren't aware of the overall plot, a little filler for you here. Succession is literally about succession. The family in focus are known as the Roys, and they own a media empire that, although fictional, borrows fairly heavily from a network like Fox. As it goes, Logan Roy, father, CEO, and head of the family, is making his way through the back nine of life and needs to pick a successor. His 3 children and extended family fight this out for the entirety of the show, and its resolve occurring in literally the last episode.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty accurate summary there, Ray, and even though we aren't as focused on the acting or the story itself as much in this episode, they'll definitely factor into the overall conversation, given that there was a lot of organic interaction between cast and crew during production and a lot of improvisational work as well.
And while we harp on Succession, let me elaborate a bit more on Pat's career behind the camera, because it's extensive. So, very recently, he worked as DOP for B Unit for Martin Scorsese's movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, but more on that later. And if we rewind all the way back to the beginning, Pat got his start working on set for Ghostbusters all the way back in 1984.
Yeah, and we intend to discuss all of this and everything in between. So, that said, I'm Poxy Leonard with Miss Reagan. And when we return, Pat Capone will join us, so stay tuned because you are listening to The Ghost of Hollywood.
Have you ever wondered what happened behind the scenes on your favorite films or television shows? Want the inside scoops from the actors, directors, and cinematographers who worked on them?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for interviews with past, present, and future filmmakers from fan-favorite movies and TV shows such as Hellraiser, Die Hard, and The Offer.
Listen in as host Poxy Leonard and Miss Reagan interview actress and producer Jamie Brewer, well known for her role as Addie Langdon in the FX original series American Horror Story.
More interested in how movies get made? Check out our interview with casting director Jackie Birch, whose work with John Hughes on 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, and Weird Science catapulted stars such as Judd Nelson to international fame.
The Ghost of Hollywood takes you on set as we discuss the best of cult classic cinema, nostalgic television shows, and blockbuster hits with the actors, directors, and screenwriters who worked on them.
Catch the latest episode of The Ghost of Hollywood wherever you get your podcast.
And while you're at it, don't forget to visit our website and sign up for our monthly newsletter for all the latest updates and episodes at theghostofhollywood.com.
Welcome back to The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Reagan, and joining us tonight is our friend and cinematographer Pat Capone. Cutting his teeth as a camera assistant on Ghostbusters back in the early 1980s, Pat has worked on movies such as Philadelphia, Sleepy Hollow, Signs, and more recently on Killers of the Flower Moon. And this is all just a small section of a substantial resume. Now, while Pat has spent a lot of time working on B Unit for the big screen, it's his work as director of photography on the hit series Succession that has set a firestorm of interest and intrigue in his approach to working behind the camera to bring it all to life. He's also spent a great deal of time filming artists such as the Rolling Stones or politicians such as Jimmy Carter. That said, I'd like to welcome Pat Capone to The Ghost of Hollywood. Pat, thanks for joining us. How are you this evening?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
All right, so one of your earliest credits came when you took the role of second assistant camera on the 1984 paranormal classic, Ghostbusters. This would also mark the beginning of an extensive career filming in New York City. That said, in recent interviews discussing shooting on location throughout New York City for Succession, you mentioned how the changes and developments in the city have impacted your approach to filming there throughout your career. So, revisiting 1984, what can you recall about director Ivan Reitman's approach to capturing New York in Ghostbusters during that era?
Well, Ivan had a great approach. First of all, it was mostly about the jokes and the antics of the four of them. But and it was very collaborative. Harold Ramis was there, obviously, the writers. So Laszlo Kovacs had quite a input as to camera placement and how to document all of this craziness. But you have to remember, at 1984, and I'm going to bring this up many times in the conversation.
All right.
There were no techno cranes. But Steadicam was in its infancy. We had a Chapman crane that would ride an operator and an assistant, would get you maybe 20 feet off the ground, maybe a little higher. So we had to, try and figure out ways to get cameras in different places. And not that we couldn't figure it out, that there was no technology to get us in those places other than parallel. You would build a structured parallel, but the camera was stationary on that. We did do a shot where the Steadicam operator, and I want to say it was Ted Churchill, I believe, rode on the Chapman crane, came down to the ground level, stepped off, and followed the Ghostbusters outside of City Hall. And that was like a big innovative thing, a risky thing to do.
Yeah, that's right. Like you're talking like right when Dan Aykroyd, is this when they signed the loan right there when they get fired? Because those are some pretty open shots.
That particular shot, I think they leave City Hall and they say, "Come on, let's go run some red lights," or something like that.
Yeah.
But there were other wide open shots, obviously, that we used rooftops and fire escapes, but the technology was not there for moving a camera quite a bit. Obviously, no spider cam.
Well, there was go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was curious because I know that there's a use of miniature for some of the master shot, like the scenes at the very end of the movie, correct? So some of that was done on stage in L.A. Yeah.
Here's an interesting thing: the way the industry worked at that point. So I was hired by Laszlo to do 5 weeks in New York City, and as the second assistant. And during that time, Laszlo said, "What are you doing? Why don't you come to Los Angeles and finish the movie with us?" And I said, "That's fantastic. I would love to." But the unions wouldn't allow me to go. Well, they would allow me to go, but they told Columbia Pictures that they would put a standby second assistant on for me.
Why is this?
I mean, Laszlo goes, I can't pull, they're not going to go for that. So I only did the New York version. With Joe Tebow was the first assistant. And for the life of me right now, I can't think of the operator's name, but it'll come to me.
So how is this transition years later now when you go into, over the years in New York? I know in previous interviews you talk about how say the exposure in Times Square was pretty intense. So what was the transition in time? Because you've done a lot of shooting in New York. So
well, you have to also realize that the film stock at the time was 50 ASA. It was 5247. And at night, I don't even think Kodak had a night. You would push the film, but then we would use AGFA film at night because it was like 200 ASA.
All right.
But so obviously the speed of the films was incredibly inhibited. Also during the day, 5247 would get halations and the sky would totally burn out. So operators were, instructed not to point too much toward the sky. When you're looking up to a skyscraper, they would have to have very little sky in it or else it would just bleed through the film. And then you realize that we went from, sodium vapor to mercury vapor to LED lights to, neon was a big thing, in the 70s. I'm sorry, in the 80s.
Yeah.
So much had changed. The lenses got faster. And then somewhere in commercials, we started shooting film. We would shoot film and then transfer to digital instead of film. And you had a lot more latitude. That's kind of like the way we do Succession.
All right. So as far as the latitude, you're just talking about the lighting, right? You're saying that you have a lot more play with that.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would say not until like Roger Deakins and around the time of Brother We're Out There. We're Out There. I think he did the first digital print on a feature, I think. And so you had so much more latitude to save what's in the negative.
Oh yeah, I know like with those shootings, say my experience is limited to like shooting on an Arri Mini, but I know that shooting in RAW in the dark, if you look at the RAW footage as opposed to something with the LUT on it, it's incredible how much it can pick up under like literally low to no light.
It's a boringly flat shot. So all of those, the technology, the faster lenses, digital, the city itself coming to life with more light, and the fact that you need less light. I mean, night scenes, they would spend a huge amount of time bringing 10Ks up to fire escapes and lighting hallways and getting access to apartments so that you could put lights in someone's window to make it look like they're, watching TV or they're having dinner. Now that's all available light. You can point it anywhere and get a good image.
So if we're kind of, basing around with some of this development with Succession as well, let's look at your first assistant camera work, on the film Philadelphia, correct? That's the first time you did a first assistant camera on credit?
Philadelphia was my last, was that my last job? I believe that was my last job as an assistant.
All right. Well,
yeah.
I know a lot of cinematographers have talked about Jonathan Demme, in his style of shooting, say, close-ups, and we'll talk more about the inside out stuff later. I know Reagan wants to bring that up with Succession, but a lot of cinematographers have talked about his influence, with close-ups and the intimacy and the way that he captures emotion. So when you were working with him, were there any lessons you took away from your time, working on those sets, especially on Philadelphia?
A lifetime of lessons. I did many things with Jonathan. I did we toured with Jimmy Carter for 2 or 3 weeks while he did a book signing tour. Oh, wow. I've done Neil Young concerts with Jonathan. I've done documentaries about Haiti and the floods in New Orleans and several movies and TV shows.
Well, then,
Jonathan.
Go ahead. How did you get to know him? When did you two come back? When did you get together then? It sounds like your relationship's much deeper than I'm knowing about.
Our relationship started, I believe, on Philadelphia. Was there something before? I might have done something with Declan. No, I became friends with Declan because he saw Jonathan's name on my resume. That's that connection. No, but I was hired by Tony Gianelli and Tak Fujimoto to be the assistant on Philadelphia. All right. This is when I met Jonathan. He, when you're in college and everyone has this enthusiastic, kind of euphoric view of the world, he still had it. And he brought it to the set every day. And I'll get to his directing style in a moment, but his personality was infectious and it was contagious to everybody. He would walk on the set, he would make sure he said hello to everybody, but when it was time to start, he somehow was able to turn it off. And he just wouldn't make eye contact with you, and everybody knew it was now serious time. He would have us film crew members doing their craft, and he would make a little reel at the end of each movie. But beyond that, his ability to always think out of the box, whether it was story, location, a place to put the camera. And I saw this grow from first of all, one of the first days on Philadelphia, we're doing the scene with Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington is in a judge's chambers, and they're talking about innocuous and some getting out of a cancer thing. And Jonathan says, "Okay, now look right into the camera, into the lens." And then Denzel says something like, "I heard about this, but you really want me to do this?" And I go, "Yes." And I think Tom was in the scene, and he's like, "It's too hard. I'm taught forever not to look in the lens." And I was shocked. And if you had a scene with 5 people at a table, but the scene is really about 2 people, When those two people, their coverage comes up, Jonathan would have them look directly into the camera. He did it on Silence of the Lambs, which I was not there. He did it so much on Philadelphia. And you don't realize it watching the movie. And you say, wow, why, those two characters are really connecting. Go back and look at it. They're looking right down the barrel.
As watching some of these actors, particularly how prolific they are, how does this bring about their natural level of vulnerability? So when he's like looking right into the camera, because that's pretty, it becomes interpersonal there.
Yeah, sometimes we would take the other person and put them right behind the camera operator, so at least you'd see their image. You knew they were there, and the voice was coming from there. I'm not sure how they, some actors, like De Niro. I mean, sometimes they'll say, look in the matte box, that's your eye line, but Bob wants the person there. You would like take off the matte box and stick the actor's head right next to the lens. Don't put a little piece of tape on the matte box. He wants to see into the actor.
That makes sense.
So everyone's a little different.
No on the waterfront stands in for De Niro. Then that makes sense. I understand.
No.
All right. So, did you make the jump from assistant to operator while working under Laszlo Kovacs for The Next Karate Kid? And if so, what led to this transition?
I did a TV show for 4 years called The Equalizer, where I started as the second assistant. I wound up after the first season being the first assistant. And then toward the third and fourth season, they would let me operate a little bit. But you have to realize in those days, so this is the mid 80s, it was very strict. You didn't just jump from one craft to another very easily. It was, you have to learn how to pull focus before you can learn how to operate. And actually, it was good. But at times, it was also kind of handcuffing people. So I had worked with Laszlo on Ghostbusters, some other projects, some commercials. Whenever he came to New York, I was lucky enough to be on his list. And he was doing The Next Karate Kid, and he called me up and asked me if I wanted to be the B camera first assistant focus puller. And I said, Laszlo, I have to tell you, I really don't want to leave town for the summer to pull focus. I really want to start operating.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation. He said, let me speak to the producers and the director tomorrow, and I'll get back to you. And he called me up. I said, oh, this is never going to happen. And he called me up and he goes, get yourself a crew. We're going to go to work. And that was my first long stay operating job.
Nice. How was it like as far as, once you actually got on the ground with that? And because that movie's kind of interesting in a way. It's a young, you're working with the young Hilary Swank in that, right? So
I think that was our first film.
Yeah. So exactly. There's a lot of, kind of youthful vibrance going on in these new positions there. How was that during the actual transition when you were working on set? Did things go pretty smoothly for you? Was there a hard learning curve to it, or?
It was a hard learning curve. There were times it was piece of cake, but there were times where, luckily I was the B camera operator. There were some learning curves, but Greg Denault was the first camera operator. Danny Gold was the A camera first assistant, and everybody was extremely supportive and helpful. And we had a great time. And Laszlo is a great teacher.
So over the next decade or so following this, right, you would continue working as a camera operator on several well-known movies Hollywood had to offer at that time, right? So there's so many that we can't go over them all, but to condense, so these are included but not limited to films such as 8mm, The Summer of Sam, Sleepy Hollow, and Zoolander. So of these projects, what were some of the more challenging or empirical processes you endured that would allow you to continue to develop your career as a cinematographer?
That's really interesting. And I'll go back to the fact that even when I was a first assistant, when you're near the camera, you are privy to conversations between the director and the DP constantly. And you know how they attack a problem and how it's problem solved. You hear the conversation from the DP and the gaffer and the grip. So you're like a sponge all the time. Barry Peterson, who shot Zoolander, very, very good DP. At the time, he was a very successful commercial DP. And he might have shot some short films, but I think this was really his first feature.
All right.
And Ben was also directing. So I had, not that I had a lot to say, but I mean, I had a voice. And I brought my experience of operating features and designing shots to both Ben and Barry. And I thought we made a good team.
Are you responsible for Blue Steel?
Absolutely not. But it was another interest. We attacked it with wide angle lenses.
All right.
And very close and kind of center punching a lot. And it worked out. It was something that grew between Barry and Ben, and I thought we executed it very well.
Now, say with like during this time, there's a lot of transitions as far as camera movement ability. With we talked about that earlier, and Steadicam starting to come up a little bit, but. Using something like using zoom lenses to capture movement or other creative ways to capture movement before that began to become something of so much ease. How is something that how are you able to incorporate that into today's world? I mean, I know that probably this has come into hand a lot with Succession, but say in other instances where you're working on say second unit stuff that's dealing with larger establishing shots or scenery or action. How does that come into play there?
Right. Well, the first rule I had for myself when I did second units was to be a chameleon in both lens choices and camera movement and lighting as the first camera, as the main unit.
All right.
Because you don't want this to stick out, So I would go to dailies, I would study. And how I transitioned, like with M. Night Shyamalan, I was, people wanted me to operate, and I didn't want to operate too much anymore. But I was able to use my operating ability to get me on the set and then do their splinter units or second units. That's what Tak Fujimoto did for me on Signs. So now I'm on the set all the time as the B camera operator, and then 1 or 2 days a week, every other week, I would go out and I would have a laundry list of things I had to get. But I knew what Tak and Knight were doing, and the same with every other second unit I did. And even when on The Village, when it was Roger Deakins instead of Tak, I knew what Knight wanted, but I also knew what Rogers.
So how do you mitigate that between cinematographer and director if their views aren't aligned?
Oh, sometimes that's very tricky. And sometimes, yeah. But the real successful, the real professional people, you don't find that much. It's very rare that they're not aligned.
Well, I would imagine someone like Roger Deakins, especially when you all approach these projects, it's probably the equivalent to having really studied the game. You know what you're going for. There's not a lot of improv there.
I mean, some people come to the game with a whole lookbook. Storaro on Ishtar. He had a whole book as to what every color meant. And he would hand it out to whoever wanted it. Gaffers, electrician, camera department. And we knew what his color emotion was for the movie.
Well, having worked with film, I mean, that would be something that would be, you would be incredibly beneficial there because you understand the different strips and stuff that are, say, something using Path A versus Kodak or something. It's going to really allow the colors to pop in a different way. So I know that's allowed you to emulate going forward. Go ahead, Reagan.
Oh, with Signs, how did you approach the cinematography for the second unit? Now, I know we're kind of aiming more towards talking about Signs, but what challenges did you experience in creating a cohesive visual style with the main unit?
Knight storyboards his entire movie. And every day you'll get the sides, which are the words for the day, and you would get a copy of his storyboards. So there wasn't much interpretation than this is the shot we need, and this is where the camera should be, and get it the right time of day or set it up and all of that. Some of the things I'm really happy about on that film is it's the reflection of Mel Gibson when he sees the alien in the pantry on the shiny knife.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was something that was storyboarded, but I mean, it had to be executed. And we set it all up and we line it up, and the knife was just not shiny enough.
Yeah.
And the special effects guy goes, "Give me the knife." And he went into his shop and he made it like a mirror. He just polished it. It saved my butt.
That's some of those shots have to be kind of difficult. It's like, say, like, I know like there's a lot of mirroring stuff, and again, we'll talk about that with Succession a little bit, but not like having reflections. I don't want to now to deviate before we go too far ahead back onto the set with the way that some directors are so specific. Say with, I feel like a good example of this would be when you've worked with Tim Burton, especially when you've worked you're trying to like set up a pass in New York. Like when you were given instructions on something like Sleepy Hollow or a film that's like, you said unique to color palette or however that is specified. What is the depth of approaching something that unique? Is there a lot of collaboration with special effects beforehand in the director? A lot of testing in the field for color? How does that go?
Tim Burton would like mix the color of blood himself. He would have the special effects people there, and he literally, no, that's too purple, and he knew exactly what he was doing, and he had an artistic palette for it, and he knew what materials he wanted to use. So that was interesting to watch. Getting back to Jonathan, I watched him evolve from that looking in the camera to you look at a movie like Rachel Gets Married.
All right.
And when he started shooting with Declan Quinn, the camera had a lot more movement to it and a lot more almost like Succession-like work, where you would look 360 degrees. I mean, Declan was hiding lights behind kitchen doors and stuff to be able to get faces cleaned up. So that was also an evolution of a lot of filmmaking that went to a reality type of filmmaking. And I say that because something like The Big Short, I had worked with Adam McKay on other films, but something like I did some second unit on The Anchorman, which was straightforward comedy.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, I show up on this set for a couple of days on The Big Short, and between him and the DP, they start describing this action to me and the style, and I'm like, oh, this is nothing like I was expecting to come in here and do today. So you just, look to put the camera in different places and make it as unique and reality as you can.
With Signs, though, you mentioned how Shyamalan, how he storyboards this whole movie. Now, do you prefer working with storyboards when you go to do these projects?
At times, storyboards are incredibly helpful. They're really good to have. There are other times when you might just get locked into it too much and not vary from it. But when you're doing, I think you had mentioned this maybe in the questions. There was a storyboard sequence. The only thing we storyboarded on Succession in 4 years was the car accident at the end of season 1. And that was mostly because it was shot at 1, 2, maybe 3 different locations, and including the underwater work at the stage. So we had, and there was 2 visual effect shots. So we needed to make sure we didn't forget anything, and we knew what part of the story we were doing where. So that's the only time on Succession we storyboarded something. You've stated in previous interviews that like many directors, know the language of cinematography. So with that said, how often have you found yourself in a position where so say you have to collaborate with directors a lot. Obviously, you're collaborating, discussing lighting and that things. But what happens if they don't take your recommendation, or if they kind of usurp this? Is there a position where this doesn't work out, or that you're able to learn from them in some way every now and again? What's the play back and forth on that? Well, you always learn from them, and you always say, okay, he's seeing something or she's seeing something I'm not seeing, and either listen. First of all, it's their movie. So you try and help them, and I'm talking about people that are not camera savvy, and you try and explain to them or show them with either a viewfinder or in pre-production movie stills or artwork to get a feel of wide angle, long lens, compression focus, center punch, short sighting, all of this language. And some of that, some directors' heads just spin. It's like talking to an 80-year-old about getting on the internet.
All right.
But they know the words and they know the acting and they know the story they want to tell. I've not really experienced this, but maybe I have when I was an assistant and maybe on TV shows where you might see headbutting. And then everybody starts digging in their heels and trying to show, no, we got to do it my way. No, we should do it my way. And I think that's more of a personality trait than a director's trait. And it gets in the way of the movie. And it's sensed all the way down. The cast, everybody gets deflated when that happens.
Well, from around 2013 onward, you racked up several director of photography credits for your work on television programs such as Alpha House, State of Affairs, Little Voice, and Succession. So, what drew you to the role of main unit DOP for these television shows when we've historically seen you head up the second unit on feature films?
There's a couple of, feature films, the type of feature films that I grew up loving, and the type of streaming that now exists. That feature business that model was broken. There were very few movies like August Osage County being made and American Hustle that were storytelling. So when I can help a director transition their movie to open it up, maybe get more outdoors, maybe to do a title sequence, things like that, it's very fulfilling. But I found myself making a very good living shooting green screen second units all the time. And, Ninja Turtles, stuff like that. And it was kind of frustrating. I didn't feel I was getting the projects that I wanted to do as a main feature DP. So then some people approached me about Alpha House, and I was a huge Gary Trudeau fan. And I said, okay, I'm going to try it, because when I was coming up in the industry, people would say TV breeds TV. If you get stuck on episodic, you're going to be an episodic DP and you're not going to be looked at for feature films. And I watched this happen to many of my friends that were very talented episodic TV people, but they were labeled TV DPs. So I never wanted to kind of get into that. So when this came along and I realized that all of the people I've been looking for, the writers, the actors, the directors, they're in streaming television.
Yeah.
They're making such beautiful stories. I mean, just look at the last, from just before the pandemic to now, the amazing television and streaming we've been watching.
Yeah, it's definitely come a long way. I mean, in the depth of it's come back. Like, you remember like the 70s, you used to see like episodes of Bonanza or something would be like an hour or so. And I feel like the depth of this stuff is really starting to come back where, and you're getting the dialogue. Like, that's a big success. I don't mean to be redundant with word use here, but with Succession, I think, is that you're able to capture people's attention with human interactivity rather than the big explosions. But you've also done a lot of work in visual effects. So, like, not directly, but say when you've had to work on something like the Ninja Turtles, or you've had to do second unit with movies that deal with a lot of like high level visual effects, or we'll say just to be late CGI. How do you have to work with the special effects teams? Because I'm sure this has become something that's more interactive as the years go by now on like a computer generating sort of level. How does that work?
It's extremely fun and challenging. I just didn't want to do it every day anymore. But I learned so much. Night would have Pablo from ILM very early on when we did signs and things like that. ILM was involved.
All right.
And I learned so much from these people. Everybody was learning. And we were really problem solving. And it was scientific, and it was something I wasn't aware of. And you blend the two crafts. And then, what you can do digitally and green screen, and nowadays you can friggin' do anything. But it was very challenging and fun. It just that after a while, you're in a green screen with, fake steel girders and fake and stuntmen running around, and 20% of what's in the frame is going to be in the movie.
Yeah. I guess I could feel there's a futility in that after a while. I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, moving more towards Succession, you worked alongside fellow cinematographer Christopher Noor. So
Yes.
what made your collaborative effort with Christopher unique? And how are the both of you able to maintain a healthy workflow on set? Because I know that's got to be very important to teamwork.
And you all work separately, to explain to the listener. I know you'll explain that in farther detail, but you work separately as DOPs, but you kind of like shared some components, obviously the aesthetic, crew. You've done a lot of interviews together, so.
Yes. Well, when we both got there the first year, we inherited the crew that was there.
Okay.
Gaffers, camera people, and they were very good. And both Chris and I looked at the pilot and watched them do the first 2 episodes. And we both said, okay, we like this. This maybe we can do better. And this is something that Jesse Armstrong wants, and we shouldn't really stray from that too much. And we would have these meetings, him and I, just because we knew each other for years. I used to pull focus for his father, who was a very successful commercial DP.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I've known Chris for years. So we would have these conversations, and he would come up with some great ideas, and then some people retired, some people moved on to other jobs. So through the seasons, those 3 years, we would collaborate on choosing crew members together. And we were all both very respectful of each other and made sure whoever we brought on board that we were both happy with. So those kind of things were always very, very collaborative. And also just the everyday working, when you do series like this. So I'm prepping for 12 days while he's shooting for 12 days. Well, 1 or 2 of those days, I need to take some of his people and tech scout. So we would always work with the production department and say, listen, this is a day that I don't really need a gaffer today. I can bump up one of the crew members and become the gaffer. Chris really needs the main gaffer to go on this tech scout. So between production, the ADs, Chris and I, and the gaffers and grips, we would schedule these tech scouts, either maybe in an afternoon or maybe Thursday's a bad day. Can we please do it Friday? And so that kind of collaboration, which you never see, really makes the show click. Just it's there's so much planning going into every step.
Well, that's the thing is, I know a lot of the different thing about some of these longer television shows that are streaming now is that there are so many people working on it, and you have to work really closely together to be able to capture that aesthetic. And something like Succession, that's really critical because of a lot of what's going on now. Being that everything was shot on film, with as much as 30,000 feet per day being used to shoot, am I correct in that?
We've done a few scenes, a few days that were 30,000 feet.
All right, I'm trying to brag for you a little bit.
And more.
But so what were some of the difficulties you faced dealing with a medium that, say film not being prevalent and everybody we're almost to the point now where I feel like a lot of people working in the industry are really only acquainted with digital. So how much training was required to really get the younger staff on board with that and their learning curve with digital? And were there difficulties as far as sourcing equipment or raw materials for the production? Personnel
wise, the hardest person is the loader. And we have, to get into the union, you need to still know how to do film.
All right.
But it would be difficult to find people that had a lot of experience loading film. That's why when we traveled to Europe every season, we would, the last 2 to 3 seasons, we would bring our loader with us wherever we went. Only because there was so much film to do. And, if you go into Croatia, you're not 100% guaranteed that you have someone there to do it. Another strange part, I've never been on a job where so many people, actors, crew members, camera department, obviously Chris and I, were still photographers, and very good still photographers. So our loader, would shoot 35 millimeter film. And he knew how to, load a still camera and load a canister with, Tri-X and stuff like that. Equipment-wise, when a director would come on the set and they would look at our video taps, people are so used to seeing, when you shoot with an Alexa or a digital, what the image is going to look like on their $10,000 monitor.
Yeah.
Okay. You can, you come out of the tent with the DIT and you've tweaked things and it looks beautiful. And in fact, because not a lot of people shoot film, the video taps are not really upgraded as often or as well as they should be. There's just not enough need for them.
I understand.
We almost switched video taps after season 2, but you could not get the information of footage counter projected on the bottom of the monitors for the directors.
Oh, so is that going to make would that make time jamming the time code difficult?
Mark Mylod looks at the counter and he knows whether he can just yell in and tell them to just back up 2 lines, or he has to stop and reload.
Okay.
So that's a director's tool, knowing how much film is left in the camera. And we shoot 3 perf instead of 4 perf, so that a 1,000-foot roll is 12.5 minutes instead of 10. So you pick up 25% more time, and you save 25% film. The other thing, I don't think there was much of a difference. The Prestons, the follow focus is all the same. The light rangers that assistants use, the viewing system is much better to be optical than doing a video tap.
Well, that's like what you were saying in previous interviews. You had mentioned that you all would go to you said a trick that you had because what Christopher was like, just turn down the monitor and the directors will just think that's what the light. And you were like, I'll take my still camera and show you and be like, look, this is more what it'll look like. And I understand because say you even show somebody something under like a Rec 9 or something like that, and you're like, right, this is what it's but we're not printing it this way yet. We just get an idea of what it's going to look like because if we set this into it, that's all we've got. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I can imagine trying to elaborate on that on a set where it's that critical and everything's going on, that communication's key, and it's probably takes a lot of patience.
Yeah, I mean, we're running around and the director would pull me over and he goes, I don't see anything out the window. We're in Santa Fe and we're only there because one of the reasons is we want to see all the mountains out the window.
Yeah.
And I go, don't worry, it'll be there. It'll be there. And then he just kept on, I don't see it. I don't see it. Next day, 2 days later, you go on pics and there it is. And then, so that happens for a couple of days, and then they realize that we know what we're doing.
With both you and Christopher, you have alluded to the idea that when you're filming Succession, 2 cameras worked well, but 3's a crowd. So, given that there were no marks and a variety of organic lighting situations, how did the crew work to stay out of the shots and capture critical moments? So, even if they're perceived from a less traditional perspective, as was the case in the scenes of Logan Roy's death.
Well, some of our famous scenes, I think, take place around dinner tables and long conversations and being able to shoot over people's shoulders and rack focus to people in the foreground and get reactions to people when they're not talking. And a lot of times that's done by laying plastic on the floor in a shape of an L, and one camera will take the end of the table, one camera will take the other side of the table. Right. And either on dollies or butt dollies, they will slide and use every inch of that 4x8 piece of or 4x16 piece of plastic that they put down.
Yeah.
And if there's a third camera in there, you can't make the whole run yourself because you'd be running into somebody. So it eliminated some of our hunting and searching for things.
That makes sense, especially because the entire thing's voyeuristic. I know, say I had read, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of say with Jeremy Strong's character as Kendall would be pretty standard here. Some of the automatic zoom pulls were almost to give this implication of eavesdropping. And you've also talked about the actors how they would organize themselves around screen time. So maybe I'm not wording that correctly, but say wherever they're positioned, did they have to fight for camera space, or was there any kind of challenging to battle? I'm assuming they are, the way you're laughing.
I'm laughing because they would almost body block someone else after the shot with it, occasionally, But it's very funny because we went to Los Angeles, and the first scene we're doing, the local second assistant from Los Angeles is mocking Kieran as we're doing the rehearsal. And he would bend over and pick up the tape. He'd move to another place, the guy would tape him. He'd bend over, pick up the tape. And he looks at me and he goes, "A new guy?" Tell him we don't do this. So I said, "Don't mock him. Don't worry about it." And sometimes, like, I might say, I'll see something. I go, and I said it once. I go, "Kieran, where you sat was a great spot." He goes, "Okay, I'll never do that again."
So they really took the effort to, I'll be blunt, to fuck with you guys.
Yeah, but it meant that, oh, maybe it was an obvious place I shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
He took it that way. But there are times we did a scene in season 1 in Santa Fe where we had done 1 or 2 scenes in this apartment that was kind of like a crack house. They were smoking crack.
Yeah, when he has his little lapse moment there.
And Roman comes to take him out.
Yeah.
To save him. And we're like, okay. And everyone's like, let's just shoot it. Let's not even block it. Let's not say the words. Just something's going to happen. I'm going to come in the door and let's just see what happens. And we did it. And it's actually a lot of that tape is in the final cut.
Well, those are like the best kind of drug scenes. You know, I felt like that was done really well because it was organic. And I'll give an example. Say like you see a lot of performative drug use in visuals in movies. But let's go back to like the early 70s. Let's use Panic in Needle Park with Jerry Schatzberg, where it's really raw and gritty and there's no exploitative notion. It's really just capturing what's going on. And I thought that was done really well. So that scene, you know, because it steps out of that environment very temporarily in that scene, you know, and then when, of course, Kieran comes up and plays it almost to a level where like his sarcasm in that sort of environment makes you feel like he's in danger because, you know, these guys are meth heads, like they'll trash you.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a lot of angst brought to it as well. But that's interesting to know that you all improv the entire scene.
The entire scene. And you know, and kudos to the director, Miguel, who, you know, not staged it, but propped it correctly, found the right location. You know, we just kept it down and dirty. So kudos to him. And of course, Jeremy would research it to the 100th degree, which he does everything, and it shows. But that was quite, you know, certain directors we always kind of, and I was happy you mentioned John Cassavetes before. We would always reference Cassavetes or Greengrass that did Private Captain Phillips.
I'd be shooting at the stars if I told you.
Yeah, I think that's it. But we always, and Jonathan, we would always reference people that like that, that we never wanted Succession to be cinema. We wanted it to be, have a real world to it. And what I loved about movies from the 60s and the 70s and Roger Deakins' work and Tack's work, and Nestor, I assisted Nestor on his last movie. Things were beautiful, but things were kind of natural. They weren't kind of pushed over the top. I mean, there's room for that, and there's places for that, and I do it other places. But this show we thought was motivated, natural light. They don't know how good they have it. They don't realize how beautiful their apartment is and the view is. They figure everyone lives like this.
Oh, and a lot of it's written too. Like, where's that scene where where you all are shooting? What, Jeremy and Kieran's in the other window? There's somewhere it's kind of like you know, for somebody like kind of on the day to day would be like, wow, it's a beautiful spot, and then Jeremy Strong's like, it's pretty small in here. It's like only side note, you know. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like you're literally like, you know, like all of these people have like kind of incorporated this like Dagny Taggart sort of Atlas Shrugged mentality that's really ruthless.
Well, two things we always said: billionaires cannot control the weather, and they cannot control health. So if there was bad weather, damn it, they were going to walk into bad weather because it really put them at a disadvantage having to walk in the rain. They hated it as billionaires, probably as actors too, but certainly as billionaires, they hated it.
Yeah. How did Jeremy feel when y'all jammed him up in that subway or in the tunnel and was like, now you got to run through the city?
That was Chris's episode, but yeah, he came up, that was a rough one for him. But, you know, a week later, is when he walked in the office into the board meeting, and you would think it was shot a second before. I mean, it's just a phenomenal actor that he is.
Now, I want to talk about your relationship with color, Sam Daly. But before we get to that, I got a real quick note on this. So something I don't think anybody's, maybe they have, but I'm trying to make myself
trying to make yourself look unique.
Yeah, I want to be important. No, I'm just kidding. But the reality of it is that so a lot is going on here with like Waystar and the news in the background. So on the television screens in the background, you all obviously had to shoot and develop a lot of this too. So did you have to shoot a lot of broadcast medium? What went into that sort of or even the part where they do the video editing of Logan Roy's voice, and they're not quite understanding, like, these are obviously people who have been sat down in front of avid media composer for 10 hours. So how do you all translate that sort of real life editing and that sort of broadcast potential into this show? Because that's something that I think comes up a lot that's kind of overlooked because of the more stylized versions of the cinema verite or the dogma stuff going on.
Yeah. Well, we have a woman by the name of Katrina Whalen, who went from like graphics to second unit director, associate producer, doing just that. And she did an amazing job with it. And she would do all of these graphics, and then our video team that would get them pumped in. And, So let me finish on this point. So all of those banners are written by the writers team. And if you really, one day someone's got to sit down and go all through Succession and just read some of those banners. They are hysterical. And, just right out of Fox Television,
Yeah.
But there were times we would do, somebody throws a piss bag at Brian Cox.
Yeah, and right in the street. Was it really tea or was it piss? What was it? You guys didn't throw
it was some kind of yellow liquid. Okay, but I'm the guy holding the iPhone. I hand the iPhone to Katrina and Ben.
Yeah,
we load equipment upstairs. We're ready to do the scene upstairs. They already have it on the monitor, edited and in. The last scene in the last episode this year, they're watching. The 3-4 siblings are watching a luncheon that Logan Roy and Kerry and
when they're all like going over the lines. He's doing a gimmick at the end. Like
yes. Yeah. We shot that on an iPhone. We handed it to Katrina and Ben, and an hour later we shot the scene with the actors coming in, and the footage was there. That's how we rolled.
So when you did it, are you shooting it in like Apple ProRes RAW and then cutting it there? Or you just literally like just shooting?
They bring it upstairs and throw it on a computer and cut it.
Oh, damn. So it's real news then. I mean, you guys are really like playing the parts in sync with it. That's incredible.
Okay. So here's another one for you, because we really don't like visual effects. So Tom and Greg are firing 200 people at ATN or something.
Yeah, the meeting.
They walk into a room and there's a Zoom going on.
Yeah.
So we shot a few episodes this year. We shot like 2 or 3 weekends at the CNBC stages for the election. Right. We scattered 30 extras around that building with live feeds to cousin Greg firing them. All of that's live. All those people are within 100 yards of us in the building somewhere.
Wow. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. And, we said we want to do it. Okay, how are we going to do this? What are you going to go to 25 different locations and build a little set for them to be in? We walked around, the director and I walked around and we said, this is a good spot. This is a good spot. And we were being followed by people with little cameras, and they set them up. And, we would light them a little bit. And that was it.
Now, your relationship with color, Sam Daly, was critical to the development of Succession's, overall aesthetic. So when Sam was asked about this during an interview, he mentioned developing a LUT that was said to emulate the look of the films, films from the 70s. And you've both said that shooting on film provides an incredible texture and highlighting to certain scenes, which is unique to that medium. Now, are you able to say more specifically what particular influences from 70s films or television series factored into this look? And I mean, not even movies for instance, like maybe movies, but even the film, the film stock that you've used, the cameras, anything of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's a combination of I grew up and, I saw the movie The Graduate, and I said, I want to make movies.
All right.
When I was a still photographer. So subliminally, those movies are etched in my mind anyway. And that whole natural, realistic look, that was kind of that era of filmmaking. The Bob Bentons and the Brian De Palmas and, early Scorsese. It was so real. So that's kind of where that based from. But he created that LUT with Andre, the original DP turned director for us. That we tweaked it maybe a little bit, but I would say we adapted more to the LUT than we ever had the LUT adapt to us.
You have mentioned this before, but I found this really unique, a really unique approach to capturing emotion when working with actors on screen. So can you explain to our listeners what it means to shoot from the inside out? So, like close-ups first and master second, and why you find this critical to capturing the raw emotion of the actor in front of the camera.
We have a group of actors that they like to be fresh, hot, and heavy, and let's go. Okay? And we try and have as little amount of downtime as possible. So to do that, you really want to be in close and see what's going on. And if you walk into a set and you establish the set with a wide shot, and then you do mediums, 2 shots, and then you move in closer and do the close-ups, by the time you get to the close-ups, 3 hours could have gone by, if not more. And our team, our ensemble, would have been much fresher on the wide shots than by the time you get to the close-ups. And that's not really advantageous to telling the true story, getting the most out of everybody. The camera wants to be in their face. So that's the advantage to getting the real quality stuff. And then when everybody is like, okay, we got to do this again. This is now like take, the third setup, take 10. Everyone's a little stale of it. The normal way as a DP, you light a room broad stroke.
All right.
Okay. And then when you go in and do the close-ups, it's called cleaning the people up. You'll bring so the light's coming from the window. But when you do the close-up, you'll bring a light in on a stand with better diffusion, and you'll wrap the light around the actress beautifully. We don't do that because we can't bring that light in because we're going to spin around 280 degrees, and then we're going to drop back. I've created a lighting situation that I can't necessarily recreate when we drop back. You're kind of lighting backwards, which is not a good thing to do as a DP. So the challenge is getting a big enough lighting source from these big windows.
Yeah.
And that starts with finding a location that we love, and being able to push some very big soft light in. And I go back to working when I was a trainee on Fame, working with Michael Saracen. I mean, the English DPs would bring in huge amounts of lights and diffusion and make it a very big, soft light. And that's something I bring from that era when we were talking about what Sam was saying in the 70s, to try and bring that. I mean, that's what Roger does, Roger Deakins. Big, large sources. And then you can move around a lot and not have to clean up so much people. I'm very fortunate that Shiv is an amazingly looking woman and she doesn't need to be cleaned up very much. So and then she could be underexposed 2 stops and she still glows.
You talk about the creamy textures and the lighting coming from the film. You also talk about this, like you're getting these scripts and you guys are like, okay, it says evening. So evening's like 30 minutes, like how we're going to chase light the whole time. How the hell is this going to work? So you're also like presented with these challenges a lot that have allowed you to utilize these large concepts, like you're saying when you were just discussing the flooding of light with Deacon. So how do you do that? Whether you is that how you've done some of these larger scenes on the yachts or things of that nature? And
yeah, I mean, we, on a movie set, you will shoot day until it becomes too late. Mm-hmm. And then you sit around and you start lighting for night. We don't have that luxury to wait an hour and a half of not filming. We try and work only a 10-hour day so that we don't even break. We try not to break for lunch so that when you break for lunch, it becomes like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you lose momentum. So we never want to sit and wait for night. So we use that hour of light and we try and do a scene, and we establish between, Christo Moss, the AD, and Mark Mylod and the other directors, we say, okay, what scene can we make twilight, and how can we get the wide shots, and then I can light the close-ups. So it's strategically many, many people playing Tetris with the schedule as to how we can do that. And then 2 or 3 cameras to get the look.
What about the handheld? But they're so talking about the dogma stuff. I know there's like traditional rules with some of this stuff that become almost pretentious to a degree, but you all have borrowed some of that style and then incorporated it into some traditional like layouts. So, the whole thing isn't handheld and shaky. We're not watching Reno 911 or anything, but you have some really nice establishing shots. You have some things that flow very well. Where you talk about the balance in that, where on set, as far as a technical balance of like transitioning from setup to breakdown, do you just have to keep a lot of hands on set to be able to transition in and out of those shots? Do you work through the handycam shots first and then go over to the others? How does that play out?
Normally a scene will dictate whether it's handheld, whether it's long lens on a moving dolly, or if it's even more traditional, just a non-moving dolly. That is something that's discussed after we hear the words being read, and sometimes it's discussed during the table read. And then we try and find scenes within the episode where we can give the audience a break, and by contrast, showing how frantic one scene was by the next scene slowing everything down, as opposed to handheld havoc, handheld havoc, handheld havoc, trying to separate them. And that gives the handheld more weight because it's coming out of a scene that was not handheld, or vice versa. All of a sudden, it's this beautiful establishing shot, or, a symmetrical large table with lawyers and business people at it. So it gives more emphasis to that business life, the more structured business life.
So would you say that it's almost more technically complicated to be able to capture shots that are loose and handheld like that than it is? Because, if you're really dealing with some of these cameras, that you all have a lot of control even in your hands there, even though they appear to have a shake and stuff going on.
Right.
Is that more difficult than just having some of these establishing shots set up where, you're running a dolly or Steadicam or something?
Yeah. It takes so much more feeling of the scene to where Gregor or Ethan, our operators, will just slide over and know that just by sliding a foot to their right, it adds so much more to the shot based on the dialogue. Based on, I always say I always loved when Jerry and Shiv were in the same scene, because you're looking at the political business world view from 2 women from different generations.
Yeah.
And that was always a great look. They would always give each other a look and stuff. But that's the operators and, us creating a language over 4 years that we know each other so well, and the cast.
Now, before we move on real quick, and I know we're kind of beating you up here with some questions on Succession now, but you have mentioned that people haven't talked much about the evolution of the team. Do you feel like the real success with this is that the acting team, the acting crew, the cinematography crew, and the direction, everything's there, and there's kind of this in with it mentality of like, say, if you're going long, everybody's there because they want to be there. Mm-hmm. There's an intuitive understandability of what makes this work, which is why it is successful as an art form, and that as a show.
It was the perfect storm. The words are amazing. It's the best ensemble I've worked with in 40 years. All of that, and the freedom and the support of production and HBO, Frank Rich, and to be able to massage that script we get usually very late in the way films are streaming is made. Yeah. We'll get a script, for the table read. That's the first time we'll see it. And that's maybe 10 days before we're shooting. I mean, we have outlines. We have an idea of what we the assets we need location-wise, but not the words. So all of that massaging from production to myself to the camera team, the directors, we had to create such a shorthand that we know each other so well. And we've tried. I mean, we would never have thought of doing that 20-minute scene season 1 or 2. It was just something that we can do this. You know, and our joke was, well, we've done worse. We might as well try it. You know,
when the actors slip in improv like that, they just go with it. They just bounce through. Or you guys?
Oh, they love it. They love it. It's like doing a play. I mean, if you look at some of those scenes that are 8 to 9 pages, we shoot the entire scene from the minute they walk in the door till the scene is over.
Yeah, that's
without stopping.
That's intense. That's crazy,
yeah.
Especially in a newer style. You know, I mean, in the past, you would have said like Hitchcock close-ups. You would have been like, say your line and go. So you're literally putting on an entire live performance.
Back and forth.
This is a story I've told a few times. Fisher Stevens and I knew each other before he came on to Succession, and we're in upstate New York. We're in like one of these big business conventions, and the main characters, there's maybe the siblings and the 3 or 4 head honchos from Waystar are all in this suite. There's 9 of them in the scene. And after about the 3rd take, 4th take, Fisher says to me, Pat, let me know when you're going to do my coverage, because, you know, I want to try and do something a little different. I go, Fisher, we've been shooting your coverage is almost done. What? I said, people get you and grab your lines all the time.
Yeah.
He goes, oh, I didn't know that. So, from then on, he was on all the time.
Oh, so that's kind of where you turn the energy up. It like has this competitive notion to it. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like doing theater.
More recently, moving away from Succession, you have worked as second unit director of photography on the film Killers of the Flower Moon, directed by Martin Scorsese. Now, can you walk us through the process of collaborating with Scorsese in order to achieve his vision and style?
Yeah, you go through Rodrigo.
Elaborate. All right, we can condense that in. Yeah, tell me about you working with Rodrigo.
Also, you know, Ellen Kouros, who I've worked with Ellen, operated with her on things we've done with Marty. So she has an ear with him. So it's basically, I mean, I was only there for a short time. It's basically just executing and being loyal to the look that Rodrigo had. And, you know, just, you know, I after halfway through the first day, I realized that the camera should never be moving, not even tilting, you know, very little camera movement. So, you know, you adapt to that. And, you know, when you shoot stuff, you walk over to the first unit, you know, you'll show some clips, and it's feedback between Rodrigo and I.
All right, it sounds very, very straightforward. I guess it's probably not straightforward, Orion, but so maybe let's redirect kind of the question in as far as what's your relationship like with Rodrigo, because you've worked together on Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, and Argo.
Yes.
What else?
Yes. That's a very good question. Flower Moon. That might have been it.
How'd y'all meet up?
He's fantastic. He's got a great eye. He's really fun to be around. He's very supportive. And again, when I did Argo, I think I had maybe 15 minutes with him and with Ben Affleck at the end of one of their long days.
Yeah.
And both Ben and he were so articulate that it made so much sense that what I had to do. Jump to the Wall Street one. It was a lot more impressionistic. We had a second unit director that had some great ideas, and we had a lot more to do. And we'd come up with these ideas, and we were on our own a lot more than the other movies. And you just know what Rodrigo's taste is. Obviously, Oliver Stone would, you know, sit us down and talk to us about things we needed.
Yeah.
But there was a conversation about the whole movie among all of us. So it was easy to like go up and do the helicopter stuff. It was easy to do the montage of things collapsing and things like that, the economy collapsing. The opening shot of the movie, which I did, but really it was totally planned out by Roger, which starts on the motorcycle and does a circular shot up and then pushes into a board meeting. And then that's the end of the titles. So that was a title sequence that I did some things with that were fun.
Do you have to deal with the motorcycle scenes when LaBeouf and Brolin are riding together out in the woods?
I did that, yes.
Oh, that's nice. So how do you work on that? I mean, did you all shoot that from motorcycles or shoot from cars or?
We had electric cars and chasing them, and we had one motorcycle that would have a camera mounted on it, so they can tailgate very close and go as fast as those Ducatis.
Yeah. All right.
So they have kind of more range for speed. But before we wrap this up, we do have a few questions about the NYU film program. So you attended the NYU film program.
No, ask him about Hamilton. We're gonna ask about Hamilton. That was a good.
Oh, you wanted to ask about Hamilton?
Yeah, you should ask about Hamilton.
a miscommunication.
Don't shy away from that one. We were just talking about plays. Now I was ready to jump in.
I personally really like the Hamilton musical.
It was directed by the director of Hamilton, which was fantastic.
Oh yeah, definitely is probably great to have him on set with you. But
yeah, and Declan Quinn has done a lot of live music and live shows. So we also, since tickets were in such demand and so expensive, we had to be as unobtrusive as possible. I mean, we took rows out of people that had tickets for months, and then all of a sudden they get there and they realize that their ticket is a dolly track. Uh-oh. But the theater and the production company smoothed that over with everybody, gave them much better seats, found them chairs and aisles, gave them maybe a different night, but that was all worked out.
Oh, it makes sense. It's like I watched this Dick Van Dyke episode recently where he promised everybody that they could all come to this play, and he couldn't come up with the ticket, so at the last minute he threw them all in the play.
Oh my goodness.
That's a good idea. We could have done that.
That's all I got if it ever happens again. But you win for outstanding technical projection for this though. So what goes into shooting all of this?
Well, it was called like a TV show. So we had an assistant director that does award shows and everything. And she would call in our headsets what camera, get ready camera B, get ready entrance George Washington stage right. So we were and we rehearsed it and we watched the play a couple of times before we started shooting it. And then we had one day where there was no audience and we just did sections of the play on the stage that we needed, that we wanted to do Steadicam shots or close-ups and things like that.
All right. So just kind of getting more coverage. That way when the audience is there, you don't have to cover nearly as much?
Yes. There was one day where you can actually put the cameras on the stage and we put a techno crane right in the first row and things like that. But for the most part, it's all shot from the audience's point of view.
All right. Got is this? I mean, you in your earlier career shot some professional sports and stuff. I mean, maybe still photography.
I used to film hockey and tennis for an assistant that worked. He was a photographer for Sports Illustrated, and that's when I was in college. That's kind of what I did.
Is that same sort of audience movement? Then I'm sure things have changed as far as being able to you're not flying things on cords and stuff as much as you would have been in the past, but. Does that experience in your earlier days help when you're filming something like a live performance?
Well, yes. Well, those were stills at the time. Yeah. So you would have to follow action and do your own, focus the camera yourself. You were a one-man band. And it taught me a lot. It really did. I have tons of rock and roll photographs and stuff that I used to do.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. When you did shot with Neil Young and them live, would you? How were things set up then? Were you set up at a distance? Were you set up on stage a lot? I mean, I guess the movement would have been a little different then.
Yeah, a lot of different ways. When I did the Rolling Stones, I did 3 Rolling Stones concerts. Oh. One with Scorsese, where I was positioned, and Bob Richardson shot it, and it was almost like the last waltz. We had this phenomenal team of operators from Bob Ellsworth to Andrew Lesney to John Toll. It was an all-star team, and so that I was positioned just to the right of the drums, and I was shooting kind of like side to them and then through them to audience reactions. Other times I've gotten, side angles, long lenses from the middle of the orchestra area. Neil was pretty much a lot of from the audience, almost shooting through people's heads. I was parked one night like a fifth row and just shot as if I was watching the show.
Does the audience bother the hell out of you all when you're doing this? Or
Yeah,
they're like,
do they
hey, man, is it...
Once the show gets going, everybody, it's kind of okay. But yeah, they're a little startled to see a 35 millimeter or an Alexa sitting next to them. Even documentary style with the Jimmy Carter work. I mean, we literally did not stop shooting from the minute he appeared till the end of the night. We would shoot him in and out of the motorcades, in and out of the book signings. He would swim in the morning. Somebody would swim with him.
What is it like? What was it like moving around? I mean, Jimmy Carter is in his 90s now, but then that would have been what? He would have been in his late 70s then, so he's still pretty much on the move.
Yeah, 13, what is that? 15 years ago? So he was in his mid-70s.
And I wanted to ask you a few questions about the NYU film program. So,
yes,
if I'm not mistaken, you also teach there from time to time, correct?
I do. I love it. I'm an adjunct professor in the graduate school of filmmaking.
All right. So, given this, what are your thoughts on academic learning versus apprenticing? So, do you think there is a place for both?
Absolutely. There's a place for both. And apprenticing, I'm still apprenticing. I mean, every day you go to work, you learn something, and you have to solve a problem. Your grip, who has worked with another DP, might give you some unique way of doing it. A prop person might, have some magnets that they can use to hold up something through a piece of wardrobe or something like that. You're always learning. But the thing about film school is you learn the basics and the rules that you can break later on. You can't break the rules if you don't know the rules. So screen direction, continuity, blocking a scene, the color palette, things like that are, when you go out and you shoot a student film, that's when you learn. When you come back and you try and put it together, you learn far more from your mistakes than your triumphs. So you will find a scene that doesn't cut, or the emotion that you wanted out of an actor you're not getting. And that's where you learn it. And I do tell some of these students, you're done here. Get out and do something.
How does this?
Like, you mean in a good way or a
film,
bad way? Like, this ain't for you, man, or
No, in a good way. You're really talented. Don't get caught up in academia. You got that part.
Yeah,
now
to, get your hands on it, get out, pull some focus, load some cartridges.
Students are so talented, and more so than when I went to school. But when I went to school and you came out, there were either documentaries, commercials, or feature films. There was no MTV. There was no music videos. There was no iPhones. I mean, there's no excuse not to go out and make a movie now. Take your iPhone, get some friends, write a script, and go make a movie.
Yeah, I mean,
there's no excuse not to.
Well, Sean Baker did it with Tangerine a few years ago, and I know there's
exactly. Yeah.
And was there just stuff even with the film resurgence? There's a lot of creative uses in film, say with what you all have done with Succession and Winning Time. This has kind of had some interesting incorporation, which I think helps. Let's say we talked to Robin Vigin, who worked under Douglas Slocum for years, and he would really place the emphasis on the small things of how important it was to learn how to pull focus, or what it was to be able to frame shots, or even kind of, know where to be at the right time. So a lot of that on the ground it's not such an ideal static world. It's more whether you can hang with the game, I think, once you get in there and you're doing it, from the sound of it.
It's an amazingly labor-intensive industry. It is handcrafted every day by, the fifth grip. is doing something that's extremely important to make this dolly a good dolly shot. You know, I mean, everybody carries their weight in gold on what they perform on a film set.
Yeah, and it's a dangerous job. I mean, we'll let you go here in a second, I know, but it's an incredibly dangerous job. There are a lot of cinematographers who have been killed and put themselves at risk and some pretty, I mean, actors, everyone does this on set, but I feel like the intensity.
Well, one of the main reasons for that is the length of the day and the length of the week and the hours you put in and the staggered hours. You can start going to work at 6 a.m. on a Monday morning and then shoot the full day. Then you need a turnaround. And by the time you go to work on Friday, you're going to work at 6 at night. You might be working till, early, like 6 or 7 o'clock Saturday morning. That's a very long work week.
Yeah.
To maintain your sanity over a long period of time.
How have you done?
That's something that really needs to be addressed in our industry.
Is this something, and with the overwork, now, is this something now it's almost like there's an athleticism to this. So you have to stay, especially as you get older working this, you worked in this industry your whole life. Do you work a lot to stay physically in shape, adept to this stuff, and ready to be able to kind of have that turnstile dexterity?
Absolutely. When you're an operator, you are an athlete. You're squatting, you're holding the camera on your shoulders, you're stepping around a boom on the dolly, you're on your tippy toes, and then, coming down to sit on the seat. That I always, big stretching, I'm a cyclist, things like that.
Yeah,
you feel it as you get up in age.
Like you'd have to be relatively flexible from the sounds of it.
Absolutely.
That's what I always see. Like every cinematographer, anybody that works in a camera crew together, regardless, always looks, and I'll be blunt, they always looks like they could beat the hell out of you. Like they're really in shape.
they got big arms.
Ever since the tripod disappeared and you start seeing more steady cam and movement, all the cinematographers can now effectively kick your ass at the gym. So, so I said, no,
but we really can't. We're a bunch of autistic wimps.
Hey, we're hyping you up here, right?
All right. Well, Pat, appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today for sure. It is an open-ended question before we go. Over the year, what have been some of the largest influence? What are things you've taken away throughout your career that you feel like younger filmmakers or people that are getting involved in industry could? What's some advice they could heed?
You have to be a people person. You really need to treat everyone as you want to be treated. Everyone's there making huge disparities in labor costs, but everyone is working those hours. And you need to appreciate everyone that's there. Appreciate their craft and know their craft, but don't take their professionalism, don't make them jeopardize their professionalism for something you want to do quickly and shoddily.
Well said. I think I personally would need to heed that advice.
You took it to heart.
And you were listening to The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Reagan, and we've just finished speaking with Director of Photography, Pat Capone. Stay tuned. We'll be back to say goodbye right after these messages.
Interested in television or movies?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for the best in cinema-related podcast at theghostofhollywood.com or wherever you get your podcast. Welcome back to The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Reagan, and we have just finished speaking with Pat Capone about his career as a cinematographer and his recent work as the director of photography on the Max series Succession and the B Unit for Martin Scorsese's latest film, Killers of the Flower Moon.
We'd like to thank Pat for joining us on tonight's episode to celebrate our Season 3 finale here at The Ghost of Hollywood. We're also excited to announce that we've officially joined the weekly late night lineup on KBOO 90.7 FM in Portland, Oregon. KBOO has been supportive of The Ghost of Hollywood since its inception and is a longtime community staple. As listener-supported radio, you can donate to KBOO by visiting their website at kboo.fm/give or by texting 44321.
Oh yeah, late night every Friday night. That's right. I've got a full-time job now. Damn it. Anyway, Ray, we actually made it to this entire episode. I don't think we fucked with each other once yet. This has been very polite evening.
Oh, no worries. It's a series finale, so I definitely have something terrible planned for you at the after party.
Yeah. You know what? You do that glitter bomb shit with the toothbrush bristles again this year, and I tell you what, Reagan, you know how long it took me to get all that shit out of my car? Look like Marvin in Pulp Fiction.
You know, that took me a long time to do, too. I had to cut the bristles off like 47 toothbrushes.
Ooh, 47.
No, it wasn't too bad. Chris helped out. It was a group effort.
Chris, hell, I suppose whatever happens this year will be less labor intensive.
And twice as lethal.
Ooh, great. I get to try out my new insurance policy. Yes. Is it going to be for my car or my health?
That's a surprise.
All right. Well, I'm excited. Anyway, we'd also like to thank our staff here at the Ghost of Hollywood for all their hard work this season. Chris is on this list, but I'm just including him now that I know about what happened last year. And I'm also going to thank Beth and Grady and Jesse. And just kidding, Chris. It's okay. I'll leave you a toothbrush bristle glitter bomb box too. But anyway, thank you all for all that you do.
With that said, The Ghost of Hollywood will return in January with brand new episodes as we kick off our 4th season.
Oh yeah, on the way to 40. Will we make it to 50?
With everything you've put into that brain of yours?
Probably not. But I think we could make it to 50. I think we could make it.
Yeah, I hear you, Boxy. All right, wall crawlers. For more information, please check out our website at theghostofhollywood.com and sign up for our monthly newsletter to keep up with all the latest on The Ghost of Hollywood.
And that's it. That's all we got. I'm gonna get back to my serious voice. Early holiday cheers to everyone and all the Happy New Year shit or whatever. World's ending, so it doesn't matter anyway.
Way to keep it optimistic, Boxy.
Well, I try. I mean, look outside. I'm not alone here. Anyway, I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. All right, well, I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Reagan, and you've been listening to The Ghost of Hollywood.
Until next season, everybody, good morning and good night.
Good night, Ghost of Hollywood. Oh. All right, I'm sorry.
You've been listening to another episode of The Ghost of Hollywood. The Ghost of Hollywood is directed by Zach Flannery. The show is authored by Chris Klon and Zach Flannery. Composition samples and score by Jesse Garcia in Pineapple Nightmare. Production management by Mary Flannery at the Electric Garden Company. And mastering by Grady Sizemore and Microphonic Meltdown in Portland, Oregon. For more information on The Ghost of Hollywood, please visit theghostofhollywood.com.